I'm Kerry Stagmer, and we are the Blacksmiths of Baltimore Knife and Sword. We're going to be building some of your favorite things and fantastic objects you've never seen before. This is Man-at-Arms, Reforged.
On today's episode of Man-at-Arms, we're going to be recreating the Gaffi stick of the Tusken Raiders. Now, this is a very specialized weapon. It's a war club. In the Book of Boba Fett series, the Tusken Raiders teach him not only how to use the Gaffi stick, but how to create one himself. And each Tusken warrior makes their own Gaffi stick, which is personal to their own use and fighting style. Now, we're not going to be making an exact reproduction of Boba Fett's weapon. Instead, I'm going to be making a Gaffi stick, giving it my own stylization and form, the way I would want to make it if I was a Tusken Raider.
Rick goes out to our trusty walnut tree. It's right behind the shop. I think at this point it's given up so many limbs for so many different builds. We might as well just call it Groot.
You can see here that I've stripped all the bark off the outside of the piece of wood that we're going to use for the handle to make our Gaffi stick. Now the next step is I have to begin to remove material and shape it down to its form. In order to do that, I'm going to use this tool here. This is called a draw knife. It's sharp on the inside edge, has two handles. It's basically just a bent bar of metal with a blade in the center. You hold both sides and draw it across the material smoothly and evenly, and it pulls up curls of wood. In the series Book of Boba Fett, you can actually see him doing this. The Tuskens hand him a tool which is very similar to this, and you see him working the wood down into shape to get it to the form he wants it to be in. I'm doing the same thing right now.
Right now we're going to get started making the spiky end of the Gaffi stick, which I'm sure everybody's familiar with, going back to the original Star Wars film. Weapon of choice for the Sand People. I'm going to be making the spear end of it, which is essentially like a pilum, long spear. We're going to start it by hand at the one end, and we'll move to the Bradley, bit of a lighter touch than the 2B. We don't want to overdo it, so we're going to get started right away.
Kevin creates this point by hand, but he takes this big stock to the power hammer to kind of draw out the center section. It's going to be a little bit smaller and smoothed out. That's where we're going to be laying in the flanges for the mace section. Rick continues to carve on the walnut handle. He's using a chisel and cutting in, kind of to accentuate where the hard turn is on that corner. He specifically selected that so that he'd have a larger knob at the end that would be turned off to one side. But by carving, he can actually kind of increase the visual of that turn beyond what was there just by using the wood that exists. Derek and Kevin are now forging out the flange section that will be rolled to become the socket. That's going to take a little bit of time. You've got to get that very thick material driven down to where it's thin, but it has to be in the directions that allow you to then wrap it around to become a socket. Now they have enough material. They're going to go to a swage block or a formed die block. That's going to allow them to create the V shape to get it started. Then they can bring the sides around, close them, make the socket, true it up, and take a weld. Now I'm going to go to our CNC plasma table and cut out the designs that we have for the flanges. These flanges will get attached directly to what we referred to as the spear shaft, essentially that pilum-looking ended piece that has a taper. Once those are attached, this piece will be heat treated and it'll be ready to do some damage.
So you can see I've made some good progress on creating the handle portion of the Gaffi stick, but it's still not quite where it needs to be yet. I'm going to do a little bit more work, and then it's going to be exactly the shape I want it to be, and we're going to fit it to the metal part of the staff. Now, before I do that, I'm going to go in and neck in around here where it comes up to the head of the mace. Now, I'm going to use a technique which is kind of frowned upon sometimes. I'm side cutting against the grain instead of going this way and then lifting up a curl and then cutting it free. But if you use a very sharp chisel with a very narrow edge, you can actually achieve good results using this technique, and I'll show you how.
Make sure that we can locate all these flanges evenly and get a very strong weld, we're going to use the milling machine to cut a slot into this forging.
We're getting set to do the other metal piece to the Gaffi stick. The the short end, and I found a nice old piece of a very old square file, so it's made out of really good steel. I've already put a point on it by forging. I'm gonna make it a little nicer on the grinder. Then we're gonna waste it down a little bit, put some flutes in it, make it look really nice. Once we're done with that, it'll be ready to go on the stick.
Kevin turned some ridges into this tapered spike. That's really just so that the pitch or glue that we're going to use to set this into the wood has a good place to bite on the steel. If you don't do things like this, it can work its way out. Once we've put these in, the glue will be able to be absorbed into the wood and physically lock that spike in place. John now goes to the TIG welder to put the flanges on the side of this. The nice thing about the TIG is that it will allow you to not only add material, but you can blend the existing material that's there. So the forging, the metal from the forging, will actually blend into the metal of the flange, becoming one piece.
With 90% of the shaping done on the head of the Gaffi stick, now I'm going to go in and I'm going to take a chisel, which is V-shaped, and begin to cut channels in for the knurling. Boba Fett's staff has knurling on the top and the bottom. Some of the Gaffi sticks just have it on the sides. That's where I'm going to do mine. I'm just going to put mine along the sides here and put some nice deep grooves in here, but I need to cut some initial channels with that chisel first and then get in with a file and open it up a little bit more.
It's really fantastic to work alongside so many multi-talented artists. Rick designs, does all the metal work that you see in the shop. There's really nothing that he can't do in the shop. It spreads out so you have many hands to help with any task to make it lighter. But it's definitely something where his skill set crosses almost every different type of material that we can work with. From the forging to the wood, you've certainly seen him paint and do finish work for us. And of course, the sketches that you saw in the beginning were sketches that he made of a design that he wanted for himself to build this. Pretty fantastic if you ask me.
Now that the entire carving portion of this job is done for this piece, the next step is to go ahead and drill a hole where we can seat the spike that attaches to the front of the mace. On Boba Fett's, he just carved the wood all the way up to a very fine point. With the root burl that I had here, I didn't really have that much of good material to work with, so I decided what we would do is just go ahead and deck it and then put this on to the end of it. Essentially, it's just a metal fluted spike. Same thing a Tusken Raider might do. They didn't have enough material to work with, create it.
Rick uses a tool that we actually don't use very much. After he drills that pilot hole, he takes a variable sized bit that cone will actually cut that cone down into the piece. He doesn't want to overdo it because it's more extreme than the actual section of that spike. But he'll get it close and then we'll be able to fill it in. We use the torch for multiple things. One is, of course, the look. We like that burnt finish. It's got a really nice thing, brings out the character of the wood. There also is the belief that it will harden the wood, and it certainly does that to a certain degree. But you have to be very careful. Lots and lots of hours in this at this point, and if you get too crazy with that flame, you can destroy the whole thing. Rick is now applying stain. It has a couple of purposes. Of course, one of the things is to get us the kind of finish that we want. It also preserves the wood and allows it to soak this oil and this stain in. We will wax and oil this as well as we go, but this is going to give us the color, darken the whole piece, kind of give it an aged look, and it'll be very pleasing to the eye then. From Rick's personal concept drawing, to the tree we call Groot, to the forging and finishing, we now have this finished Gaffi stick directly from the mind of Rick Janney. Let's get it out there to the testing grounds and see what it'll do. Click here to subscribe, or click here to see more episodes. Thanks for watching Man-at-Arms Reforged. We need to know what you want the team to build. Tell us in the comments below what you would like to see.